Well, if you needed a reminder on this tour that one country is not Latin America, each one of these stops highlighted something different. And with Salvador, you have both the weight of the past American-Salvadoran relationship, but also contemporary issues that have nothing to do with what was happening in the 1980s, as we saw. But also, because of the changes over time in how we regard the government in San Salvador, people came here under different legal authority. Some can stay, some are given asylum, some are not. And you could hear in our people in Long Island a little bit of impatience with fixing this. But I wonder if Obama can really, given all his domestic troubles, strike out his own path on immigration. Eric?
Well, those are exactly the right questions. There is some frustration, there is some impatience, and there's a lot of confusion because there are different systems and nobody's sure about whether temporary protected status will be extended and who it will cover and how does that play into comprehensive immigration reform. Obviously, there's nothing more political in our own country than immigration reform, and so it's a complicated issue. But I think that the broader picture shouldn't be missed in the context of the president's trip to San Salvador, which is to say that there was the weight of history, and that's precisely why President Obama traveled to meet with the first center-left president elected from the FMLN, which was the revolutionary guerrillas that the United States actually fought against in the 1980s. So symbolically, this is hugely important, to sit down with President Funes as an equal partner and talk about these types of issues and talk about a future agenda. I think that's point number one. Point number two, there is a real security issue that is developing and has developed in the region from Mexico down to Colombia. And I think President Obama has to find ways to work together with the countries and the leaders in question to try to address some of these issues fueled by the drug trade, but that's affecting not just the broader society, but individuals at the community level who are threatened by violence on a daily basis. This is a huge issue, and we have to find a way to get our arms around it. And I think President Obama clearly spoke about some of those issues, and I think that's part of the agenda as well. And then the final point I think that was important for the trip was to say that there is a large migrant community of Salvadorans in the United States, but ultimately, the answer to address some of these issues is job creation and income generation in the countries themselves so that the cream of the Salvador's crop doesn't feel compelled to seek their fortunes elsewhere. And I think this is a long-term issue, it's a development issue, it's a complicated issue, but ultimately I think that's where we need to be heading in addition to doing some of these other very difficult things.
Let me make a couple of points. I agree with almost all of that. One really key thing that Obama did is he visited the tomb of Monsignor Romero. And the symbolic, not only of seeing Funes himself, but going to Romero's tomb is a tremendously important symbolic statement and a step to reconciliation. Because Monsignor Romero was seen, who was the archbishop who was assassinated in 1980, by by death squads, essentially, and death squads linked to the then Salvadoran government, stood as a symbol of the poor and a symbol of the hope for political change. So, and at the time, the Reagan administration had just come in, and we were backing conservative forces in Salvadoran society. So Obama's visit to Romero's tomb is a tremendous symbol of the way the United States has changed in how it views and accepts political change in the region. I think that's really, really important. That's the first. The second, on this crime issue, one of the things I think that was tremendously important about Obama's trip is that he talked about the problem of drug trafficking and street crime and gangs, not only in terms of sort of Plan Colombia or troops along the border trying to stop drug traffickers, but he talked about the rule of law, strengthening community policing and democratic institutions, and that's an important part of what you need to do in the region and a positive thing that we're thinking about it that way.
Is that part of the world still laboring under the shadow of the 1980s? In Nicaragua, you have, remarkably, President Ortega. When you mention the FMLN, I mean, are the party structures the same in all these places? Is the Arena Party still fighting the FMLN? Jose Napoleon Duarte D'Aubuisson are either dead or aging or off the scene, but is politics still stamped by what went on during the United States and these countries in the 1980s?
The big option is to strengthen democracy, and that's what President Obama did. I think that's very positive. The fact is that when you have civil wars, you weaken the countries, you weaken institutions, you divide, the hate appears. So that's what we are living also now there in Central America. So countries that have to put them together, to unify, to trust one another, to control crime. So when institutions are weakened, the vacuum is filled with now drugs, crimes. So the initiative that not only the US, but also South American countries and other countries, to help the governments of Central America to strengthen institutions, to make the rule of law work, to strengthen police, to strengthen the judiciary power, is absolutely critical to face the problems of development, of well-being, and also to reduce the number of people that leaves the country because they don't have security.